Us now is Andrew Selle, director of the Woodrow Wilson Center's Mexico Institute. Thanks so much for being with us. Are you surprised to see, horse racing is the sport of kings. It's genteel, and these men, I don't want to cast aspersions about their innocence or guilt, but if the state is to be believed, these men keep the company of people who chop people up and put them into bags.
Yeah, this is really the juxtaposition of the worst criminal element, because Miguel Trevino is believed to be the toughest of the Gaceta leaders, the most vicious of the Gaceta leaders in a very vicious group with a very elite sport and a very genteel sport. But I think it tells you that, they're very sophisticated operations. They move into all sorts of areas that you wouldn't expect. And they're doing things, we're used to drug traffickers owning bars and restaurants and maybe hotels. But why not horses, actually? It makes a lot of sense.
Why would it make sense to you? What's the time?
A lot of rural background. It's something that is common in Mexico, and what they did is sort of naturally move up from, owning horses on a farm to owning horses that race in the elite racing circuit. So as they got richer, they just moved up on the scale of what kind of ranching they did, and they moved up into the most elite bracket.
Big, mean farm boys, but farm boys nonetheless. Let me ask you, if you look beyond horse racing and say beyond the southern U.S. states, are there any indications of how many different kinds of business they've penetrated and how many different kinds of places? Are they just looking north, or are they looking south through Mexico as well?
We think they're probably looking all over. They probably have businesses all over the world. When we talk about $20 million, which is what the authorities have said that they probably laundered through this operation, it could be much more, of course, but that's a drop in the bucket in what is probably a $6 to $9 billion operation a year in drug trafficking from Mexico.
So why do they bother? Why would they bother doing this kind of business? It's chump change to them.
It's chump change, but you have lots of different things which are chump change. There probably are lots of businesses like this. They also sometimes launder money through the financial system. Sometimes they bring it back in bulk cash. They probably have businesses around the world. You add it all up, and it does make a difference.
Now, let me ask you about these men themselves. Once again, I don't want to talk about the people who've been accused in this case, but when we talk about the Zetas, we're talking about people who just last month were blamed for a massacre, I think it was 89 chopped up people found on the side of a highway, and proudly announced with graffiti on the wall, 100% Zeta. They take credit for horrendous crimes. Why are these guys such nasty characters?
The Zetas, the world of drug trafficking, brings out the worst in people, obviously, in general. But even in that world, the Zetas are known as being the most brutal group. They really have perfected the art of going after, if you want to call it an art, of really trying to terrify their enemies with brutality. Most drug trafficking organizations and most transnational organized crime groups are not that violent. They certainly kill people when they want to, but they're not as graphic about it. The Zetas have really gone out of their way to try and make an example when they kill people. They've been implicated in killings in a casino fire, in this incident where they dump people on the road, and in many other killings, the killing of migrants actually traveling north from Central America through Mexico. This is a group that really tries to terrify its enemies by doing graphic, vicious killings.
Is it working, or are Mexican authorities managing to get any kind of control over them?
It's worked in one way, which is that they have expanded as a group. But at the same time, they've expanded their reach, and they really have become an international group. The Zetas started off as a much smaller group. They've become much bigger. There's a lot of signs that the Mexican government has actually been able to break down some of their command and control. So they've lost a lot of their mid-level leaders. This blow is probably going to hurt them in some ways as well. And they are not as coherent a group as they used to be. So yes, they're bigger than they once were, but the Mexican government actually has succeeded in trying to limit some of their ability to really control their operations. And it looks like some of the Zeta operations around Mexico and in Central America may no longer respond as directly to Central Command as they once did. And that may be the first step in breaking down this organization, or at least limiting its violence.
So are we going to see more of them, more of their money, trying to find new places to call home, like the horse racing business in the United States, or other presumably legitimate businesses?
I think we will. Money laundering, I think you're going to see a huge effort by the U.S. government and by the Mexican government. We shouldn't forget, by the way, all the money that goes into these drug trafficking operations, almost all of it comes from U.S. consumers of narcotics. So this money is mostly on the U.S. side, and they're trying to get it back to Mexico. Money laundering is very sophisticated. It's very hard to prosecute. But the U.S. government has said that they're going to get much more active at going after the U.S. side operations of these organizations. And I think they're starting to apply some of the techniques we've seen against terrorist organizations, some of the anti-money laundering techniques that were used against Al-Qaeda and others, to groups like the Zetas. And I think we're going to see a lot more seizures, a lot more arrests based on the money laundering operations.
Andrew Selle of the Woodrow Wilson Institute, Mexico Institute. Thanks so much for talking.